over tomorrow.
Let me just start this off by saying that Deathloop is not a 10 out of 10 game. And if you're wondering how IGN and GameSpot could have possibly given it a 10 out of 10, well, I'll give you one guess. But despite game journalists having an obvious secondary motive to give this game a high score, this is still a good game. Let me just make that clear. This is a game that, for better or worse, nobody actually seems to care about. I'm a big fan of Arkane Studios. Well, sort of. I've played all of their games since Dishonored. So I actually was interested in this game, even though the marketing was pretty terrible. So I was going to cover it regardless if anybody actually watches this video. Which is kind of a shame because I've actually enjoyed my time with this game quite a bit. Though full disclosure here, at the time of this review, I have not finished the game. I am very close. I figured out how to kill 7 out of 8 of the visionaries in a day. But I just didn't have time to finish it because I'm going to be busy the rest of this week. Sorry guys, so I basically had to slap this together. Consider this an impressions review, even though there's no way my opinion of the game is going to change whether or not I finish it. I just don't have time to make this a properly structured video. Trust me, you'll have more than enough of a good idea of what type of game this is and whether or not you should buy it without a proper script or better editing. No, you don't really need that, especially for this game in particular, which you'll see why. But yeah, do the things the algorithm likes. It really helps the channel, especially when I make retrospectives that nobody watches, not even my own subs. But yeah, enough of the pity party, let's just get right into this. Before I even describe what this game is, you've probably heard that this game has performance issues, and it absolutely does. They're pretty bad, to be honest. While my PC is definitely above average, at least based on the Steam statistics that they release every once in a while, I don't know how often. It mostly ran okay. The only reason I had to turn down the settings was for OBS, so I couldn't be showing you any of this footage if I didn't turn down the settings. However, as I played more of the game, I discovered quite a few issues, the main of which is if you're ever fighting more than 4 enemies at the same time, the game will literally just freeze for multiple seconds. It freaked me out every time. I thought it was going to crash. And the game only saves after you complete a level, so you can stand to lose a lot of progress. And yeah, based on everything I've heard and seen, if your PC is like 5 years old or more, do not bother buying this game, period. It just won't work. There were people telling me they had like a 1050 or a 1650, and the game wouldn't even run at 30 frames on the lowest settings. And look at this. Does this look like a fucking hardware-intensive game to you? No. It's literally just Dishonored 2 with a new coat of paint, and that's exactly the problem. The Void engine is horribly unoptimized, and it's why Dishonored 2 had huge performance issues at launch. So hopefully eventually they'll figure that out, but I think they're pushing their shitty engine to the limit here. So I wouldn't exactly get my hopes up. So yeah, if you have a potato PC, don't bother. Alright, moving on. So what kind of game is Deathloop? Well, despite what Arkane Studios will tell you, this is a roguelite. It is. You can debate me on the semantics of what constitutes a genre, but in my eyes, a game where you die and have to start it over again is at its core a subgenre of rogue, whether it's roguelike or roguelite. And I'll admit this one is definitely on the light side. There's not that many rogue type of mechanics. I would still consider it that just for the repetition aspect. This is a game that stretches 4 levels, even though there are 4 variations of those 4 levels, and they do change the levels quite a bit. It is still only 4 levels that you're going to play over and over again. Though unlike most rogue-type games, you do have 3 lives in most scenarios, and you get those lives back after you finish a level. On top of being a roguelite game, this is an action stealth game, emphasis on action. Some people have said this is basically just Dishonored, but with no consequences for killing people. And yeah, I think that's a pretty good approximation. It's basically the same type of gameplay. You have superpowers in one hand, you have guns in the other, and most of the powers are ripped straight from the Dishonored games. You got teleportation, turning invisible, linking together enemy lives, so if you kill one, it kills all the ones that are linked. And you can buff yourself to go into a sort of rage mode. On top of these powers, you also have a hacking device which can hack cameras and turrets. The turrets of which are pretty powerful, so I use that quite a bit. And you also have a grenade that has 3 different functions. Either standard frag, proximity mine, or tripwire. I mostly just use the grenade function. As for the weapons, there's not really that many, but the ones that are there are pretty interesting. You got your standard handgun, magnum, machine pistol. The assault rifle looks like a World War II plane gun, which is kind of cool. It's Arkane playing into the whole retro future aesthetic that they seem to love for all their games. There's a pump action shotgun, an automatic shotgun that has 2 barrels. That thing is kind of insane, especially in the PvP, as we'll get into later. And then the rest of the guns are like special variants. Also, for those of you who care, this is one of those games where there's a dedicated kick button. And yes, you can kick people off cliffs. It's funny every time. I actually didn't have that many bugs while playing this game, but one of the biggest ones was that the sniper rifle scope doesn't have a reticle. Literally, I can't shoot anything with the sniper because I can't see because the reticle didn't load in. But yeah, some of the other guns are cool. You can actually dual wield in this game, and one of the special guns is 2 like bedazzled pink pistols that can turn into a burst fire submachine gun, which is kind of cool. But yeah, the shooting feels pretty good. Guns have appropriate recoil. Only thing I don't like is there is considerable bloom on some guns. I never like bloom, especially when you have recoil too. I mean, what's the point at that point? So if you played Arkane Studios games, you know that they like stealth. Even in Prey, there were a decent amount of stealth mechanics and focus, especially in the early game where the phantoms were actually a pretty big threat. Well, Deathloop is a big step backward in that regard. I don't know if this is on purpose or not, but the AI feel way dumber. They're purposely given certain limitations that you can tell. Like, for example, if you shoot a gun, it'll alert all the nearby enemies, but only nearby enemies. The shot rings out for maybe 200 feet at the most, and enemy gunfire doesn't alert other enemies. So if you're using a silenced weapon like the nail gun, or later I got a scorpion that had a silencer on it, even if enemies are shouting and shooting at you, other enemies outside of the backup range, I guess I'll call it, won't show up and won't be alerted. So there's very little punishment for actually being discovered if you're using a stealth weapon or even just the machete. Not to mention that once again, this is a game where sight lines are pretty much the only thing that matters in stealth. Unless you're literally sprinting right next to an enemy, they don't immediately turn around when they hear you walking. They'll say something like, "Huh?" But then they won't even look behind them. So there's no penalty for walking nearby enemies, except maybe when you get right behind them. I don't know, I never tried. So once again, your superpowers are kind of just going to be the backbone of the stealth. Teleporting around, turning invisible, all this, you're not really supposed to think it through that often. In fact, it seems like to me the stealth was supposed to be purely supplementary, and this is mostly an action game. To compare it to another game that I'm sure most of you played, it's just like every Far Cry game after 3. If you haven't been noticed, the enemies are borderline blind and mentally handicapped. But as soon as they discover you, they become hyper aware and can see you through walls. You know, that kind of annoying stealth. That's what this is. I don't think I really need to describe the gameplay further. It's basically just Dishonored, but you're allowed to kill as many people as you want, and there's a lot more guns to do it with. So I guess we should talk about, like, the whole roguelite aspect. How does that factor in? Does it get too repetitive? It was handled pretty okay. It's certainly not my favorite aspect of the game, and this game feels like a middleware game at times, I gotta be honest. This really shouldn't have been $60. I think if it was $40, people would be a lot more interested and would be willing to take a chance on it. But again, just think about it for a moment. It's only 4 levels. Even with 4 variations of those 4 levels, that's 16 levels if you're really stretching it. But again, not that much changes. I mean, sure, a different area opens up usually at different times a day, and that can change the map up quite a bit. and sometimes nearly double the map size, which that's pretty cool. But keep in mind that there's not a unique addition to the map for every time of day. A good example of this is Freestad Rock, where in the morning you can go into the party, and while you're inside the party you only have 1 life and you can't use any of your powers. Then in the afternoon there's this underground bunker that opens up, which basically connects the entire level together, and you gotta kill this artist inside instead of the musician. And so that's kind of cool. But then at night there's basically nothing to do there except explore and find clues for the rest of the game. And speaking of which, that's what you're going to be doing for about half the game, because the whole point of the game is that you have to kill all 8 visionaries in one day. In the beginning, this is impossible. There's never more than 1 visionary at an area at that time of day until you follow these visionary leads, which are basically quests. And so as you find these quests, you have to revisit multiple areas of the map just to find a clue, not even to kill somebody there. You in fact don't have to kill anybody there about half the time, which ties into the flawed aspect of the PvP. Again, we'll get to that a little bit later. And honestly, it just feels like it's padding the game out, if you ask me. But yeah, at the conclusion of most of these quests, it'll either give you another quest, or, assuming you reach the end of the quest chain, you make a major discovery like, oh, you can only kill this visionary in the morning, or oh, enter this secret passcode, I can get into this little area and flood it and kill 2 of them at once. Or if I sabotage this device, this character will go somewhere else at night. And so there's only one solution to killing all 8, right? That's what the game's building up to. There's no randomization element to it, which might be why they didn't want to call it a roguelite, because randomization is obviously a big part of those games. Another part of why they didn't want to call it a roguelite is because while at the beginning of the game, all your items reset and you have nothing at the start of the day, you very quickly unlock the ability to infuse items with basically souls, because you lose them when you die and they appear on the spot where you died, so I'm just going to call them souls. And while you lose all your souls at the beginning of each day, you can use those souls while you have them to permanently keep weapons, abilities, and upgrades for those weapons and abilities. And so when you're about halfway through the game, the whole rogue element is barely even a factor anymore. You're basically just skipping through the day to advance these quests. And I came pretty close to the end, and I will definitely finish the game because I like the game. I think it's pretty fun. But yeah, I just can't shake the feeling that a lot of this just feels like padding. It's cool to visit each location at a different time of day to discover what's new there, but a lot of times it's just a complete waste of time. Sometimes you find unique weapons there if you do some kind of puzzle, but there's not much else to do. I think Carl's Bay, if I remember that's what it's called, that's the level that suffered from this the most, where you can only get anything useful done in the morning, and every other time of day is just to grab some minor collectible that doesn't factor into the wider plot. So I guess that brings us to the PvP element. Yeah, they have Dark Souls invasions in this game, and they're shit. Honestly, complete shit. I don't like them at all. Being invaded is actually okay. You have the advantage because it's peer-to-peer connection, there's no servers, and you have 3 lives. So despite the fact that you might think that Juliana has the advantage invading you, especially since the enemies are on her side, and she has the ability from the Assassin's Creed games to turn into other NPCs, ultimately it really doesn't make much of a difference because you have to kill Colt 3 times to put him down for good. Which, yeah, that did happen to me one time, but honestly it was just because I was annoyed with being invaded, and so I just wanted to get it over with quickly. And then I ran into a bunch of mines, and then I got shotgunned in the face. So yeah, that's on me. But the other 5 times I got invaded, I won every time easily. Because even with a sneak attack advantage, as soon as you die, you teleport to a safe location and briefly turn invisible. So if you had any idea where Juliana was before, you can run up to her and shotgun her in the back. And then boom, invasion's over. Which brings me to when I invaded. It was one of the worst fucking online experiences I've ever had. Just to get my first invasion took over 10 minutes. Because I guess everybody who's playing this game, what few actually are still playing this game, are all playing with the online off. It wasn't like I was doing it at 2 a.m., it was like 9 p.m. There should still be people playing. And then when I got into my first invasion, it spawned me like right in front of Colt, and he fucking knifed me in the back. I wish I was making this up. I literally died like 30 seconds after I spawned because I was just trying to get my bearings, and boom, dead. After that, I had a couple other fun experiences, I'll admit, but it just took too long. In 45 minutes, I only got to invade 5 times. That is not worth the effort. Not to mention you start off incredibly weak. It only takes a few level ups for Juliana to get access to some pretty powerful equipment, but those first 2 invasions were super painful because it doesn't give you anything good to work with. In any case, I imagine at the end of this week, the multiplayer is going to be dead anyway. You can look up the active player numbers on Steam, and I'm sure they're pitiful by the time this review goes up. But yeah, I think that pretty much covers all the major elements of the game. The only other thing I really liked that stood out was the soundtrack. That was pretty nice. And the aesthetics, the whole 70s retro future style is pretty nice. I feel like the 70s haven't been milked that much in modern entertainment, so I wouldn't be surprised if that becomes a style eventually at some point for some of these more stylized games. But yeah, I'm just gonna call it now. I think Arkane's gonna get shut down in the next 5 years, if that. They have some other game in development right now, I think it's called Redfall, and if that doesn't sell well, it's over for them. The only game that they've made that was like a breakout hit was the first Dishonored. Dishonored 2 didn't sell as well as the first. Death of the Outsider and Prey both bombed, and now this bombed. How many more chances are they gonna get? Not many. And I hate to say it, but I think Arkane has been making the same game since Dishonored. I mean, sure, Prey stood out in a lot of ways. It felt like a really quality, immersive sim that actually deserved that genre title, of which I'm still not a fan of. But Prey still had a lot of the Dishonored skeleton in it, you know? And every other game they made was either a Dishonored game, or in this case, Dishonored with reused assets and more killing. But yeah, would I recommend this game? Not at $60. It doesn't feel like a $60 game, it really doesn't. It feels like Arkane Studios' B team had to throw something together with a limited budget, and given that limited budget, they did a pretty good job, except for the performance issues. But the fact that this is being sold as a full-price game with no hype around it, and weird confusing marketing that make it unclear even what the game was, yeah, no, this was honestly doomed to failure. That being said, it is a pretty good game. I think half price would be perfect for it. As a $30 game, I would definitely recommend this, 100%. It's pretty fun, honestly, to go loud in this game, to just shoot everybody, and try and rush through and execute the target as fast as possible, and then move on with the day, which is what you're going to want to do anyway if you're repeating these loops over and over again and trying to complete these quests and upgrade all of your powers, because you got to kill the visionaries over and over again to do that. So yeah, while the future of Arkane is not looking too good, at least they made one more good game. Who knows, maybe Redfall will save the company. Probably not. Hey guys, thanks for watching. I had to throw this one together pretty quickly. Due to some personal life stuff, I don't have time to throw together a proper review for this one. Plus, I don't think most of you cared about this game anyway. So I hope it's up to whatever bare minimum quality standards you have for my videos. Other than that, I'm not really sure what I'm going to do for my next one. I don't think anything's coming out. I might do another news video if something big happens. I'll see you next time, guys.